There's a certain kind of American story we tell ourselves about the 20th century. It's a story of superpowers, of Washington and of Moscow, of presidents and revolutions. But every now and then, if you look a little closer, if you step off the main road and head out into the margins, you find a different kind of story unfolding at the very same moment. This one begins in the Everglades. Long before it became a national park, long before it became a symbol of environmental crisis, the Everglades was, and remains, home. A living, breathing landscape shaped not just by water and sawgrass, but by generations of Miccosukee people who knew how to survive there, how to live there, and how to carry forward a culture that refused to disappear. At the center of that story is a man named Buffalo Tiger. In his autobiography, Buffalo Tiger, A Life in the Everglades, we get the long view, what it meant to grow up in that world, to hold on to language, ceremony, and identity even as the outside world pressed in. But there's another chapter to that story, one that feels almost unbelievable if it weren't true. Because in 1959, at the height of the Cold War, Buffalo Tiger and a delegation of Miccosukee leaders traveled to Cuba and met with Fidel Castro. Think about that for a second. A leader raised in traditional camp in the Everglades stepping onto the global stage, not as a curiosity, not as a relic of the past, but as a political actor demanding recognition for his people. That moment is at the heart of a new film, Becoming Buffalo, directed by and starring Montana Cypress. And today, we're going to talk about what that story means, not just as history, but as something very much alive in the present. Because this isn't just a story about one man. It's a story about sovereignty, about land, about survival, and about what it means for Native nations to assert themselves in a world that has spent centuries trying to ignore them. So today, we're heading into the Everglades, into Miccosukee history, into Cold War politics, and into the making of a film that brings all of it back into focus. I'm Jason Herbert, and this is A Reckoning. My name is Jason Herbert. I'm a Southerner who lives in the West. I'm a historian, an outdoorsman, and a movie buff. I like finding new answers to old questions, and this is A Reckoning. Out here in the Forest Service, we're getting ready for fire season to kick off. It's I don't know what it's looking like out in California right now, but everything is so dry out here. And we've got guys who are just in the Glades because apparently there was a big fire down there just recently. So some of our crews went down to Florida, and I was like, what the hell? You guys aren't going to send me? I mean, that's home. I want to go home. Let me go back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's pretty green out here for the hills and everything. Yeah. So maybe that's more ammunition for that kind of scenario.
we're going to
We'll
see.
see. I don't know.
When I moved out here to Colorado, I realized quickly that they talk about fires out here like we talk about hurricanes back home. How we still say Andrew in hushed tones and stuff like that, right? And it's like you got to hear, and they've got names for fires. And I was like, I had no idea that it was the culture is not dissimilar because people still talk about the Yarnell Hill fire or this fire or whatever. And of course, we still talk about Andrew and all these other things, So it's been a little different. Although I wonder if the tribes that I work with out here are a little tired of me talking about back home in Florida. They're like, you live in Colorado. Now I was like, yeah, but So you guys don't even know what soft key is. So, I'm out here to tell them about the stuff, but that's all good. I'm excited to talk to you about this movie. You let me see it early, so thank you for that. I mean, I sat here and just watched it. I turned it on and I was just I remember I was watching it. I turned it on, sitting here watching on my laptop and totally transfixed. I was like, let me just watch a little bit of this up and I'll watch the rest of it a little bit later. And I sat here and dude, I could not move the whole time. It's such a cool film. And it feels to me watching it, Montana, super deeply personal to you. At least that's the way it comes across when I'm watching it. And you and I were just talking, like, this is a dude. Buffalo Tiger was was a guy people need to know. So this is cool. But before we jump into that, you wanna introduce yourself for people who might not know you. And tell us like what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Montana Cypress, and originally from the Miccosukee tribe out there in the Everglades of South Florida. That's where I grew up until the ripe age of 27, moved to Los Angeles to pursue filmmaking. It was acting first because I was too scared to do filmmaking, directing, all that stuff. But that was a great little unintentional, amazing path that unfolded because learning acting first really helped me to discover how to play with these characters, how to live in these things, how to be in the moment, all these things that are way more terrifying than directing now. So it's funny how that works out. So also learned how to write while in acting school, made a short play that turned into a short film, and then that short film got some recognition through the film festival circuit, and that has allowed me to continue to make films or kind of instilled that fire to keep going. And now I think in terms of where I'm at now in my career, it is a place where it is somewhat a result of making Red Orchid back in 2022, 1, around that region. And that had a lot of the Miccosukee language and Miccosukee folklore. So it was a horror film I wanted to do. And it was well received throughout the community. And getting, I guess, an acknowledgement or comments or adulation, so to speak, from your own community it hits a little bit harder than you would say like a film festival route or something where they come up and go, "Oh, that was cool." Something about that, I suppose, made me want to do more of that in the future. So I don't know how it transpired, but somewhere along the line, Buffalo Tiger, producer, da da da, and then we ended up making this pretty. I don't want to say quick, but things unraveled rather. I guess it felt very speedy, but we took our time.
Well, I want to talk to you about the process of making this film. Really kind of the idea of like getting in touch with Buffalo Tiger himself, like trying to inhabit this role. I can't imagine how much weight that must have carried as well when you think about who he was and what he meant, not only to Miccosukee people, but when people start to learn more about this guy and realize how important he is, frankly, to Indian country and fighting off, termination and fighting for indigenous rights and sovereignty and just recognition that people are still here. Dude, that's a lot to like try to take on. Um, but before we get into Buffalo Tiger, I want to ask you a very simple question, Montana. Um, for people who don't know, who are the Miccosukee people? And you've got, I don't know, a better part of 6 hours you can choose to answer this with. But like, can you tell us a little bit about Miccosukee people?
Yeah, I thought about this question. It's an interesting one. What separates the Miccosukee from Seminole? What makes the Miccosukee Miccosukee? And it's actually one of the questions that an interview on the Dave Garroway show that Buffalo and Tiger and then went on in New York City while gaining traction for recognition before Cuba. So they were on this TV show. I'm still trying to find real footage from that. But in my head, Dave Garroway hosting these Miccosukee, wondering what the whole thing is about, asks him, "What does it mean to be Miccosukee?" And I still don't exactly quite know, but I know technically it's a tribe of people, population, I don't know, 700 around there, maybe a little bit lower than that. We live out in the Everglades off of Highway 41 in a little tract of reservation land surrounded by the Everglades. Now that's technical stuff. Now I think as I'm deciphering it and trying to figure out who are the Miccosukee people, the first word that Buffalo Tiger says to Dave Garroway in this version of a feature length script is he thinks about it because he like, how do you translate that thing to anyone who doesn't know? And he says bougie, and then Dave Garroway goes what? And he says bougie, and then it flashes back. So bougie means grandma. Now that doesn't make sense in terms of what I'm trying to explain. Like, what is it, Miccosukee? He's saying grandma because I believe who are the Miccosukee people? What does it mean to be Miccosukee and all that stuff? Is to somehow be of service. It's to be in the community. It's to be part of the past, present, and future all in one. And when he says bougie, when he flashes back, it's to the time of the Indian hammocks in the 1920s and stuff like that, where his grandma's telling stories around the fire to the camp members and stuff. And then the Miccosukee language is all over the place. He's getting garfish for grandma. They're measuring him for patchwork jackets so that he could get his new name at corn dance and stuff like that. So it's like it's the tradition, it's the culture of being out there, and you respect it in a certain way. And I think that's what's crucial about Buffalo Tigers, because when he grew up, that is why the medicine men somewhat chose him, even though he was living in a white world at that time in Hialeah. So I think all these things he held on to and had a big respect and reverence for the medicine men, and therefore was chosen because he could speak English and knew the white man's world the best. And he listened to what they said, transmuted their ideas to the English to the best way he could to all these politicians. And he kind of held on to that whole culture system that he grew up with. And I really, I guess, enjoyed. I sort of got immersed in his biography because I'm like going through it numerous times. And he has a whole section of growing up in the Everglades. And there's so many things that I relate to in terms of playing in the sawgrass and different things and seeing the Everglades and getting in trouble in the Everglades to your uncles, your grandpas, all these things. And I think I guess that's the best way I could explain it, is who are the Miccosukee people. It's just culture. When I mean to be of service, when I'm down there on the reservation and I see the Miccosukee people come together for certain things, like anything from birthday parties to tragic things, someone passing, that everyone gets together for those moments to support. I think one of the most powerful things is that there was a sewing building that was made for just sewing classes and everything. It burned down, I think last year or the year before. Yeah, it burned down. And the way the community came together to donate and all these things. And I know most communities would probably do that anyways, but it's what I hear when I am at these events or when I see these cultural get-togethers and stuff like that. It's the language, the camaraderie, the the laughing, the the cousins, the family. I see it. It's being out at corn dance too and hearing these things and learning about all this. Well, not learning, but kind of tuning back in and the fire and all that stuff. And it's I guess it's I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it is a culture and it's like a deep reverence and it has to be rooted out there. I don't know about has to, but when you go to the Everglades and you're immersed in that, that's when it feels most potent and alive.
We'll get into maybe some of the misconceptions about the tribe, or like, I think sometimes people come to Florida and they think Seminole Miccosukee are saying people, this is, and the film is very much about showing no, two completely different folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Buffalo Tiger was always about that. And the folks I know are always like, no, you guys don't know. It's too easy to conflate in Florida. But like, I guess I wonder, like, you do Red Orchid, and then you're like, what do I do next? Like, what was the thought process in taking on Buffalo Tiger story? Like, why him, and I guess why now?
Why him? Why now? That's good because I didn't really grow up with the story being told. And then when I talked to his son in the formation of the story to find out who Buffalo was at home and stuff like that, he said his dad never really talked about it at all. So there's a certain humility in that, I believe, in the Miccosukee people, is that you do things and it gets done and you sort of move on, right? So they did this huge thing in Cuba and then the aftermath of all that. And as his sons grew up, he said he never talked about it. He just went forward and then he heard about it from other people more so and then asked him about it and stuff like that. It just wasn't on the big radar in terms of, yeah, we did this thing, you know? And I think that's why I have that title card at the beginning of the shorter version, which is no buildings are named in their honor and no statues have been made of tribal heroes. Occasionally, as he walks by, mothers whisper to their children in Ilapungi, there goes Buffalo Tiger. He is a great man who once led our people and got our land. And then at the bottom it says, maybe that's a reward, that is a reward enough, or something like that. So it kind of goes to that like thing. So I didn't really hear about it until I read about it mostly. I heard about it very vaguely about Cuba somewhere. I don't remember where. And then it kind of revitalized itself with Popeye making this documentary version that's on YouTube about the 60th anniversary of the tribal recognition. And there was a little event like that on the res, and I think I heard about it again. And I always thought it was interesting, but I didn't pursue it. It seemed bigger, right? Well, how are we going to tackle politics and Cold War and tribal politics intermixed and all of that, the whole world, 1950s. So I didn't think about it. And then after Red Orchid, I did a film called An Ode for Leviticus, which is a short film. And how I did that was through my stage playwriting. I got to meet Gary Farmer, who's a renowned actor in the native world. He's been in Dead Man with Johnny Depp, directed by Jim Jarmusch, and he's been in a slew of things: Reservation Dogs, Smoke Signals, all these TV shows and stuff like that. So I got to work with him to make this short film. He got his buddy Tantu Cardinal, who's a well-renowned actor in Canada, and she was in a nice spot where she was doing press for Killers of the Flower Moon, where she wasn't traveling at that moment. So she was like, yeah, I would love to act with Gary. So she came and did this short film with us, and I directed them. And we made a great short film together, and it went on a film festival route. And it's about an old man who's talking to the camera. He's kind of, I don't know how you say it, like train of thought, consciousness. There's all these little clues, Tantu Cardinals, an eccentric character with this hat that has like shaggy hair on it. It's a very surreal kind of film, and then I guess since most people probably won't see it, it's at the end it's revealed that he's a dog, and his owner's putting them down. So it's a very tragic yet beautiful story. That film showed in Santa Fe International Film Festival, which I didn't plan on going, but I went anyways because I try to make almost as many film festivals as I can. And you show up to these things, sometimes it's a big crowd, sometimes it's small, you never really know. So therefore sometimes you feel like the push to get there and to travel and to all these things and to get there, and then you get and you kind of get, I don't want to say disappointed, but you're like, oh man, I wish more people were here, that kind of feeling. Nonetheless, you try to show up even if it's for 1 or 100 or more than that if you're lucky. So I went, and it was great, and it was somewhat a medium crowd. Did the Q&A, walked out. Jane Myers, who's a producer on Prey, which is on Hulu, about the predator battling the native tribes, and the girl Amber Midthunder plays. So she came up right after, said, I loved your film. Da-da-da. Here's my card. Let's have lunch this week. So I said, okay, that was amazing. So I called her and we had lunch at Santa Fe a couple of days later. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because she asked, who's your tribe? And I kind of like mentioned, yeah, we're out there. Da, da, da. She's like, oh, yeah, I've been out to Seminole. And I was like, yeah, we're like a little bit more deep in the Everglades. Not in Hollywood, Florida, anywhere near like that. And then somehow in this conversation, I brought up Buffalo Tiger and that whole story. And I was like, yeah, we got recognition due to this moment in time. But she's like, wow, that's an amazing story. Let's do that, or somewhere around those lines. And then I was like, yeah, you're probably right. I wasn't even thinking about doing a film. This was January 2025, or a couple months before that, October 2024, leaking into, I wrote the first draft of January. So it kind of did that. And that is kind of answers the question of why now. I wasn't really thinking about doing it at all. And I guess it was mostly because of Jane Meyer saying, that's an amazing story. Let's do that. So I said, okay. And then the whole thing about funding and stuff like that unraveled throughout the summer and stuff. So I had time to prep a little bit and to train and to really dive into the script and to dive into family members and to go to the archives of the Miccosukee department, look at as many pictures as I could in the whole pre-production aspect of directing, writing, and acting so that I could get everything prepared so that I don't have to panic on set or anything like that. And so I guess that kind of answers why now is because mostly the producer was like, let's do this now. Because I was not thinking about doing it. I was thinking about the Seminole War movie at the time. And I guess why Buffalo Tigers? Because it's a big part of our history. And I feel like there's a lot of relation I could kind of picture. It's a lot more digestible in my mind to make that story come to life with his whole background and stuff like that. And growing up, the white man's world kind of there. And then you're at this cross bridge of mixing culture with progressive, I guess, like trying to like learn as much English as you can and all these things like that and learn the ways, right? So I felt like a fish out of water moving to the res to Los Angeles and kind of learning how to navigate and stuff like that. I mean, that pales in comparison to what he did, but I feel like a fish out of water, and I'm thinking maybe he felt like that at times, going to Washington D.C. and dealing with these big heads and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple thoughts. First, I got to talk. You made the comment on the Seminole Wars thing, like, and now I'm immediately thinking about my man crush on Wildcat. But then also, who do you even make the star of that show? Aviaka. You've got to talk about the women in that. I was like, that we're dying to see that story at some point in time, right? Jessup
Yeah.
is the big bad. I mean, I don't even know, but like, it's you mentioned that, and I kind of wonder, from your own perspective, Montana, of like, okay, you and I both left. I'm from Kentucky, and I left my home like as the only person to like go away.
Hmm.
First, I go to Florida. Now I'm out here in Colorado and stuff like that, and I'm kind of wondering. Was there a sense of timidity? Were you worried that it wouldn't be received, that you of all people were going to take on this story of Buffalo Tiger? Like, did you feel pushback in the community, or were people like, go for it, go do your best?
Yeah, I think there was a big feeling of what if this falls flat on its face, right? It's what if people get offended or something like that? Or what if it's boring? Is one of the worst sins you can do in cinema. So yeah, all these feelings were kind of intermixed. They're all in there, but I feel that confidence was rooted because when you do the script, and I guess if you are one of the directors or the producers and you're all mingling together, you're going to get a lot of yes people. So you don't know if your script is super bad or super good. You mostly know that from if you're submitting to contests, or there are like script doctors and stuff like that. I had to kind of believe in it in a sense. And I think the way I could approach it that was most helpful to me to gain confidence in it was to put in as much Miccosukee culture as I could. Because I'm not an expert in the legal world or all the intricacies of diplomacy and all these delegations and the rooms where they're talking about all these legislations and the Indian Termination Act, all that stuff, right? So what I had to do was blend as much Miccosukee world because that's what I knew best growing up. And that's a world that not many people know about. So it's what can we show in the Miccosukee world and what can we intertwine with that? So that is what I tried to put in a huge amount was that. And I believe doing the Red Orchid helped me so much to have confidence in putting the Miccosukee language on film and people respecting it and liking it because when they see the language on the screen, something about it makes them feel more, I suppose, proud or something like that. And maybe people who aren't accustomed to the language as much as they were, say, 20 years ago or something like that, like a new generation growing up with more English, with more exposure to the modern world and stuff like that. When they see it, I think it brings them back to something that's internal and then they can see it and relate to it. So that is why I tried to put as much as I could. The first 5 minutes of the film has English or something like that. Actually, the first words are spoken in Miccosukee, his daughter asking him, then it translates to English. And then for a good brief moment, we have some Miccosukee with the medicine man and stuff like that. And that is with the medicine man, with all that stuff, I didn't feel as scared. I felt confident in that. And I was hoping that that would segue to something. And yeah, I guess in the formation of writing it and translating it and all this stuff, it made me feel confident. And it made me feel proud to hand this over and show it. And that is, I guess, yeah, that. And when I showed it and when I premiered it, I don't remember feeling too scared, but it was more so at Tribal Fair Seminole where it was so packed that they had to do two screenings. We reached capacity in that room. So yeah, there is a moment of oh boy, but then you kind of get like the claps and you kind of get the laughs from the Miccosukee jokes, and then something settles in, and it's like okay, yeah, and it's a nice flow.
I'm watching, and I felt like those moments where you're hearing the elders and you're hearing Eleponke, and I feel like those moments are working really, really well. And I'm wondering when you were doing your research, and talking to his son, and reading up on Buffalo Tiger, there's this real moment where you see in the film where it feels like he's presented now with this chance, like here. You've been selected to go and do this. And I'm kind of wondering if you felt like internally he's wrestling with, he marries non-native women. He speaks English. He's living with Hialeah, I think, right? It's like he's really inhabiting two different worlds here. And I guess maybe that's the reason why they chose him. But I'm wondering internally if he's wrestling with the weight of, am I capable of doing this? And how do you even show that insecurity on screen as an actor?
Yeah, that was crucial in terms of how do I display that and that vulnerability of that. And the real story is they went to Jimmy Tiger, who was his older brother, I think younger or older, who had a village in Miami or somewhere around there, one of those tourist villages and stuff. And they went to Jimmy Tiger first, with I think 1952 ish around there. And Jimmy Tiger was like, I don't think I could do that, but my brother, he knows of the world. He's been here. Maybe you should ask him. So the medicine man went to Buffalo Tiger and presented this idea. And I think hearing Buffalo in his later years, younger years, he loved his people so much. And even though he was part of this other world, and then there were certain things of being married to a white woman that he couldn't do, was go to participate in certain ceremony stuff. I mean, that's different today, but now, back then, he couldn't do certain things due to his marriage. So I imagine there was some kind of distance that started happening because of that. Therefore, when he got asked, I felt like it was like an insertion back into this thing. And in the book, he says a whole year went that they've delegated and kind of watched him and stuff and saw him. And then they came back and said, all right, we think you're ready. And then they told him everything. Pretty much what we put in the film is that you will speak for us. You will not be speaking for yourself. You'll speak for everyone in the tribe. Kind of like a reverence for that. And to show that vulnerability of what that's like, to possibly hit when it gets to the real gritty moments of communism and the US really trying to make you guys be part of the Seminoles and all this stuff like that. I did it the best I could in Miccosukee. So he says in the film, he says, Chimungo chumishe, which is, yeah, it kind of translates to, I'm not sure if I'm able to lead you all. So I feel like the vulnerability and the authenticity of that came out through translating it through Miccosukee, because that is where so much honesty can lie in. I mean, the whole world is different through the perspective of the Miccosukee language. And that is one of the things that's inherently Miccosukee is Miccosukee language. The whole world is different in the language. That's why it's also hard to translate to English, because it's like backwards sometimes, and it's circular, and it's so I do the best I can with English and just kind of get the thought across sometimes.
One of the big points, and feels like such an internal film, So Much Montana, when you're watching this and you're thinking about like Buffalo Tiger, he's kind of, this is as much of an internal journey for him as an external thing of quite literally going to Cuba and making this point that Miccosukees are not Seminoles, right? I worked for the Seminole tribe for the better part of 3 years. I wrote about them when I was writing my dissertation. I have a deep love for that tribe and tribal members over there, all the way up to Brighton, and Big Cypress and everywhere else. Uh, that said, and if they're listening, hey guys, I miss you guys. But that said, can we talk a little bit about the differences between the two tribes? Because I feel like maybe sometimes people outside of Florida, or maybe even people inside of Florida, might get them confused. Like Seminoles are not Miccosukes, and Miccosukes are not Seminoles. As much as I love both tribes, they're different folks. Can we talk a little bit about maybe the differences between the two?
Yeah, I'm still learning as I go. I know a lot has to do with certain politics in relations to the US government. As far as cultural differences, the best I could explain through reading, through asking, through all these things, is that there were some Creek and stuff like that, associations. I know there's a couple more clans in that system. And I don't really, because I have a sister who lives there. She's Seminole. So I grew up in both worlds. We go to Seminole Reservation, we go to Miccosukee. So I never really saw the difference because I still heard the Miccosukee language. I still heard certain things. But I think it really had to do with definitely some of the cultural aspects, because there was different corn dances spread out throughout Florida. And the Seminole had a mixture with Creek, which is still going on in Brighton and stuff like that. And then there's the trail corn dances, which are so much part of that Miccosukee culture, and everybody there is mostly Miccosukee. What makes it different? Why? I would say politically, it's a whole different thing as opposed to culturally. Culturally, we're almost similar, but it's the ideas and the perspectives, I suppose. And reading about it during this time of the Seminole tribe getting their recognition and the Miccosukees wanting to separate from that, I know location was a huge factor, trying to stay out in the Everglades. They did not want to be a part of white man's world and all the stuff like that as much as possible. And they didn't want to touch the money that the state was trying to offer them to relocate or different things like that.
Were you you did a big screening on the Seminole Res, I think down in Hollywood, yeah?
Yeah.
I've been, obviously, I've got a lot of friends in the tribe, in both tribes, and I was watching with a lot of joy, Montana, to see the embrasure of this film on the part of the Seminole tribe as well. Was that your reaction as well? The Seminole tribe itself really receiving this film?
I guess it's a nice segue for the question, is because they all saw cultural similarities. So if I could, I mean, I'm no expert on this, but if I could explain the differences so much, it has to do a lot with political. But there is cultural differences going dating way back. So there's a whole thing in that. Showing it on the Seminole Reservation. It goes back to your question of how it will be received. Yeah, I was afraid of how the Seminole people would accept it, because the big line right before the title card comes up, becoming Buffalo, is he says, "Join the Seminoles, Mr. Tiger. It's the best pathway for your people." You'd be foolish to think otherwise. And he says, we may be fools, we may be wrong at times, but we are not Seminole. We are Miccosukee. And then it pops up the title card. I was kind of afraid of like how the Seminoles would take that because you're saying we're not that. No, 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 no. But it was clapped right for it. I was baffled at the reception over there. They just love it, and I think it was the cultural aspect of it all that they were proud of.
Totally, right? I mean, there's a lot of folks with both Miccosukee and Seminole relations between the two, right? And you go down trail, for people listening, there's Tamiami Trail. It's kind of like where a lot of folks live down there. I mean, there's a lot of folks who claim both ancestry and stuff like that. So when we say like Miccosukees are not Seminole, it's not like a slight to Seminoles because we both love Seminole folks, right? It's just like this is a delineation politically marking and so forth. And so much of this Montana is about the Everglades itself. And I can't help but bring up how important the Everglades are. And that's, it's in the film. We see Miccosukee, especially right now, when we talk about protecting the Everglades with all the stuff around it and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between Miccosukee people and the Everglades itself, and why protecting the Everglades, why the Everglades are so important to Miccosukee culture, Miccosukee traditions, Miccosukee identity, nationhood? Why the Everglades?
It is a place of, I suppose, where the mythological origin stories and stuff like that in the culture kind of explained. But it protected our people towards the end of the wars, and it provided a place where they would not come down even more, and life was able to sustain itself and progress throughout the decades and centuries. So it protected us. So in a way, they want to protect it, and the Everglades. It's so much part of everything in terms of the food, in terms of the weather, in terms of the chickies that we build, in terms of the medicine from all the plants. It's as much as part of the whole ecosystem of Miccosukee culture as we are a part of it. And I think there's that there's that respect for it because it protected the people back in those days, and they were able to adapt and do all that stuff. And the whole story of Young Nefushki, which is translates somewhat to the pointed land, which is Florida kind of pointed,
Mm-hmm.
where the people made their way down from up near the Tallahassee area, made their way down, down, down. That's where the corn dances are now. And I know that yeah, they try to do as much as they can to preserve what they can because the water, right, and all that stuff like that. The government kind of doing certain things to try and shift all the waters, and I still see it now, and it's an ongoing thing. So yeah, I mean, when we were filming at the Pig Jaw Hammock, where we had to take airboats out to get to.
Mm-hmm.
At night, when we go back, you can see the lights of Alligator Alcatraz in the distance. So it's kind of like weird when you're at night, like, yeah, we're filming this movie, and there's this whole thing over there, right there. So it kind of reminds me that the thing still goes on of trying to preserve as much as we can down there, but it is a vital part of the culture because we use so much of it for all our cultural practices.
I want to speak to a little bit towards another aspect of cultural practices. The very specific inclusion of the language. I don't think you could make this film without the language, right? Um, I'm in the middle of trying to learn both Comanche and Ute now that I'm out here in Colorado, and I can barely speak English, Montana. So
Hmm.
I'm kind of wondering, can you talk a little bit? And I've had these conversations with the tribes I get to work with out here, right, about the importance
Yeah.
of language preservation and like what Elepunke means to Miccosukee people, and like why that's so important that that the language continues.
Yeah, it's definitely not in the way it affects the mind, body, spirit, the Miccosukee language. It is not it's not an intellectual thing. It's more of a feeling deep down. Now I'm saying this, in hindsight, growing up and seeing that, the language kind of dwindles a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm part of that generation where it kind of started dwindling a little bit. So I feel not a responsibility to save it in a way, but to see my part and how I can display it in a way that it can kind of go on in some shape or form, whether that just be there on the film like that as a I don't want to say remnant, but like a cultural thing, a cultural standpoint, a nice thing to look at and stuff like that. Like somewhat how a painting says so much with just a single painting and can display so much of culture and all that stuff like that. Because growing up, I heard it so much, and sometimes we didn't have respect for it. It's just there. It was just there growing up, so you don't think about it. And I think that's why we lived with it and didn't really have to feel the need to, oh, we need to preserve this thing. It was just there. It was there. And I mean, these culture talks sometimes from the older elders, woo, some of them will go on for about 3 hours and stuff. So I remember being a boy at 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old with my cousins, and we'd be like, ugh. And you see the sun shadow still going, and then it's like, wow, that shadow started on this side. We're still going, and the shadow's over here. I remember those things, and God, when I look like in hindsight, that was some amazing stuff. But darn it, we were just boys waiting to eat, waiting, just getting tired, sitting around on logs, your butts getting sore. But I think that those experiences left something in me like, gosh, I wish as a kid, you could show the future a little bit and kind of be like, this is like super important. Hold on to these moments. But obviously, I think we do in a subconscious way. And now putting it out there, seeing the effect on the crowds when they saw it, it was a beautiful thing. And I think humor is so much different in Miccosukee. The talks about how we need to do certain things. And I know that there's tribal council still down there in Miccosukee, and a good Ilupungi is still a big part of that because we need that and stuff. Like people, we grow up with that. So I could not do this film without the Miccosukee language at all. That was one of the first things, and yeah, one of the actors in it who plays Mike, his name's Doc Native from the Seminole tribe,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a wonderful experience of teaching him and the rhythms and the cadence and all these things like that, and da da da. And when we did the scenes, that's one of the biggest scenes that gets the laughs, is because he jokes around in Miccosukee, and then because I've heard that growing up, and it's a beautiful thing, and it just interlocks you with, I guess, like that's what you really are, or something like that. I don't know. It's hard to explain.
Did you grow up speaking the language, or did you have to pick it up later as you became an adult?
I had to, so I'm not as fluent as my mom, my dad, my brother, and my sister. So I don't know what happened to me.
You moved to Los Angeles.
That's a big thing, but I moved at 27, so I don't know what happened to me. I think it was movies. I have to blame it on movies.
Okay.
Blockbuster, I just watch movies all day long. But yeah, so growing up, I heard it so much. One of my favorite memories is being at the car dealership with my mom and dad, because they talk in Miccosukee right in front of the salesman, saying don't trust him. He's talking crap, da da da. Or they say, I think it's a good deal. You should ask him about this. And it was so amazing now looking back. But I'd be sitting there like bored. But it's that beautiful thing of this world that you only know like that, right? So I heard it all over the place. I spoke it better when I was younger with my cousins and stuff like that. We joke in Miccosukee. We'd say like scary stories sometimes in Miccosukee. We have all these folk horror stories growing up about the Everglades.
Sure.
So that was a big part. But I think my mom and dad wanted me to go to school in Everglades City to get a better education. So like surrounded by English. And I think I was just immersed in that right from the get-go. And then movies too. I knew that I wanted to be a part of that world. I just never knew how it would happen. I seen it through the videos and stuff, and I saw Los Angeles on film. I saw all these places on film, and I said, do those places really exist? But I knew I had to get there somehow. I just didn't know how. And then as I grew up, I kept staying both worlds, but mostly the English world. And yeah, I guess that's why I just kept picking up. And then my first partner was an American girl, so it was
Yeah.
I was thrown into that world.
I want to ask you some lightning round questions here, some kind of short answer responses here. What's the biggest misconception people have about Native communities in Florida?
About Native communities in Florida, I suppose that there's only one, Seminole.
Yeah.
And I guess another lightning thing is the stereotypes and stuff like that. When I was a kid in school, they'd say, go back to your teepee. But we don't have teepees down there and stuff like that. So
Mm,
that was back in the day. Obviously, it's not like that no more, probably. But I guess that all Indians are the same as Western Indians and stuff like that. But it's a
yeah.
whole different world.
I'll tell you, I was out here and I was talking to my girlfriend. And she's like, we want to get a house and a yard. She's like, what goes in the back of the yard? Where are you going to do the cooking? I'm like, a chickee. She's like, what? She's like, what's that? I'm like, well, we didn't really have them out here in Colorado, but it was like, just trust me. They're, and she lived in Gainesville for a couple of years. She's got to know what a chickee is
Mm.
by now. Most misunderstood part of Florida history.
I suppose how much it was inhabited by indigenous peoples. I mean, every landscape when I'm driving across 75, all these things, you see all these Indian words everywhere. Kalusahatchee, Fughatche, Fekahatchee strand, all those
Mm-hmm.
things.
Yeah.
Miami, I believe, is an old Indian word.
Mm-hmm.
And all these places, right? So I guess that's the thing. And then now it's inhabited big time. And I guess how many indigenous peoples were spread all over Florida and how advanced they were as well, having to learn all the languages of Spain and French and all those things like that.
Yeah. You don't have to drive far in Florida to see native words like everywhere. They've almost become like almost anglicized, where non-natives don't think conceptualize them as like native or anything like that. But like, you're saying like Fakahatchee Strand or these places, and they're all of these talent, that are native in their names. You just have to look for them and just, I guess, kind of draw the lines between the two of them. When you think of the Everglades, what comes to mind?
Sawgrass.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's just like a sea of sawgrass or
Mm.
something.
It's everywhere. It's throughout. It's throughout the glades. I think, most people will think about alligators, but the glades are such an amazing space. That water's always moving slowly, but it's like there's so much there. I think the last time I was on the Miccosukee Res, I was eating frog legs. Last time it was
Mm.
like there's that restaurant that like the touristy restaurant. You know what I'm talking about? I think it's on Trail. Um, it's over. I can't remember the name, but it just popped up on my Instagram stories the other day.
One of those airboat places, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's like across the street from it.
Mm-hmm.
If Buffalo Tiger were alive today, Montana, what's he fighting for? What's he looking at? How does he see the world now?
I think it will trail off how the way his biography kind of ends when he's speaking about he saw a lot of changes in the 90s, 2000s that he was kind of trying to convey about I don't know where we'll go, but I think he says, but I have some confidence in the young people or something like that. And I know it's a over sung tune a little bit to say teach the young, teach the young, teach the young, teach the young. But I think it has to start with us too, which is the older folks, some of us, or middle age or older and all that stuff, to do the part as well, because the young need something to base their whole jumping start from. So I think he would kind of keep preserving as much as possible the culture of it all, and how do we intermix that with the modern world as much as possible, or because yeah, we have to mix, but also we don't sometimes. Some people can just stay out there and just be right,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a beautiful thing in as well. One of the oldest members who was a gator wrestler in the 50s, Joe Jimmy, still lives out in the camp deep in the Everglades off of way down there. And that's his life, and that's a beautiful thing. And he can barely speak English. And he has a certain tongue for Miccosukee that's way different than what I like when he speaks it goes lightning speed, but in a beautiful way. It's like so It's to do those cultural things as much as possible and community, and not to become so a part of. And that's funny, me saying that as Los Angeles and that, because I fly back a lot. So I try to do it as much as possible. And yeah, I wish I could be there more often. I mean, I got nieces and nephews that are graduating high school and then a couple are in college, but I never got to see those graduations because
Sure.
I was out here trying to do these things. And I see it's all worth it now in a sense because bringing Buffalo back, one of the coolest things was my niece ran up and hugged me and she was like, "Ah." I was like, oh, yeah. And then now I recommended one of my nieces to the people to go audition for the Land Remembered thing going on right
Mm-hmm.
now.
Yep.
They're doing auditions today. So I guess it was a good sacrifice. It's still going on. But yeah, it's what would he think? It's just preserving that community as much as possible. The whole working together, I guess, or like being together. Yeah.
You've made this film now. It's on this. It's on making its way around the tours on the circuits. Um, are there other Montana? Are there other Native filmmakers that you're watching? Because it seems to be like such a vibrant time for Native filmmakers right now. We're looking around. I talked to your brother the other day because I had the guy who does the music for Dark Winds reach out to me looking for like musicians, and I was like, I don't know, but let me ask who I know. And so I talked to a few folks. I thought maybe your brother might know him too. But like, are there other Native filmmakers you're watching? They're thinking, or like, they're making good stuff. What excites you right now?
What excites me right now, I've been so immersed in trying to formulate this feature-length script of Buffalo Tiger and how to span the whole political landscape,
Mm-hmm.
explain as much as we can of 1920 to 1980. And that is
Oh,
a huge monumental task in terms of politics, in terms of culture.
yes.
Because yeah, there's all these battles with the US, but not many knows how much battling there was between the tribes inside in terms of switching. Da, da, da. There was medicine against buffalo, medicine men against buffalo. There was all these things of being with a white woman and all this stuff. So there's so many aspects to it all that I have been immersed in structures of biopics and certain movies that are made in a way, certain successful movies that are made in ways that they span large political things. So I've been immersed in that. I barely had time to watch shows or anything like that. I haven't seen those shows that everyone has been watching. I haven't seen, and when I do go to the movies, I still go to the movies a lot. Like I went yesterday to watch The Revenant, the 10th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only time I'll see modern stuff as the movie theater. So I'm just like going to the movies to decompress from all this fact research and all these things like that. But there are people out there making things, and I know Sterling Harjo's on his second season of his show, The Lowdown. I've had the chance to sit with Zon McLaren a couple of times, who's the executive producer and star of Dark Winds, and
Mm-hmm.
they're doing their season 5 now,
Yeah.
which is amazing. So the TV landscape is definitely with all these natives coming out and doing these things, and native actors are also out there. What is exciting? There's playwrights out there that are doing things. Larissa Fast Horse. I forgot her name, Tara. She made a great play, Ghost. Yeah, there's a lot in that world, but I have been immersed. Like I just got done watching Nixon with Anthony Hopkins, like studying that, the structures and how do you do all these things. The next thing I'll watch is Che with Benicio del Toro to kind of get how they film Cuba and all these things like
Mm-hmm.
that. I watched so many things that are from the past that I'm trying to. How the heck do you do a biopic structured in a way that's entertaining and
Yeah.
tells so much of the political world in an entertaining way?
Is that a challenge thinking about like maybe the unfamiliarity of non-Miccosukee or non-native audiences to where like how tribal politics works? You talk about that. I know what you're talking about when you say, the internal politics. I've been privy to read the histories of Miccosukee and so forth. Like I know what you're talking about when it comes to that. But like, how do you get in front of, say, an audience member in Wichita, Kansas, and explain to them, this is what's going on. And like after recognition, these are still the battles that have to be fought in 1982 or whatever, right? I mean, that's got to be daunting, I think.
Yeah, because that's a great question and stuff. Because when I recently showed a FSU
Mm-hmm.
to a room full of college students, which was somehow more terrifying than the Seminole premiere,
For real.
because a good majority, I think, have to be there.
Sure.
So the last thing you want is to have people against their will watching your movie, right?
On their phones.
Yeah, there's a couple. Yeah, so
Yeah.
there's a certain terror in that. I know when I was sitting there watching them watching it, the laughs that happened in Miccosukee back in Seminole, or even Miccosukee screening, it was quiet as a morgue, right? So there's that weird thing of how do I intermix so much of all this stuff? And I don't want to change the authenticity of it. And if the reception kind of lacks in the modern world because of that, then I guess that's a proud hill to die on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that's not the case, but also not to alienate the audience so much, because I'm watching Nixon, which is I'm looking at reviews, and some people get lost in it because they go down so many rabbit holes. How do you stay to the main thing, which is I have to find one thing that encompasses the whole movie, that has Buffalo's plight, that has the tribe's plight,
Mm-hmm.
that has native country, native Indian country, their whole plight, that can translate to modern audiences. What are they going through? Da 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 da. And I think that one theme is culture in the face of, progress,
Mm-hmm.
or the modern culture, modern. And I think a lot of people can relate to that in some form or fashion. And that is what Buffalo deals with. That is what tribes deal with. That's what all Indian nations are dealing with. And some people who maybe American or whatever that have roots to certain cultures back in their past feel a little distant or something like that. So yeah, it's how are we going to do that? And I'm still thinking about it, but I'm just writing as I go, and it's trying to stay true to the Miccosukee culture as much as I possibly can. And that FSU class ended up being pretty good, and then they asked questions after, but it was mostly on a filmmaking kind of questionnaire, but they seemed to be entertained. And I guess
Mm-hmm.
that's the biggest thing I can do at the end of the day is entertain, not explain.
Totally.
Yeah.
As we're thinking about this film, as we're thinking now, the people who are now listening who are curious about Buffalo Tiger, maybe more curious about Miccosukee history, and the Miccosukee present, mind you. What's the one thing you want people to know, taking away from this film? Like, what do you want people to think about as they're leaving, as the credits roll on this? What do you want people to know?
I want them to know that the wars or anything that we're all accustomed to from films was not just, I mean, just watching The Revenant yesterday, and you're seeing natives suffer, you're seeing these things like that, and you're seeing everybody in buckskin or whatever. One of the things I want them to know is that there were brilliant battles fought in courtrooms. This is not just Miccosukee exclusive. This was so many reservations and tribes around America during the Indian Termination Act that fought for sovereignty in courtrooms and all these things in the legal system that was pitted against them.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow they managed to maneuver this political landscape without prior knowledge in like an educational sense. It was all based off of, I guess you could say, instinct and stuff like that, and how to navigate all these things like Buffalo and them. English was not their first language, yet they went to the forefront of this movement and went to Cuba to meet Fidel Castro and Che Guevara and all these people, not exactly knowing the ramifications of that thing, but they were so steadfast in their thing of being a tribe, being sovereign. So I guess what I want people to know is that there were amazing battles fought in the political landscape of America in courtrooms, not in those like war battles or anything like that. They were just so complex, yet they persevered. And then those pivotal moments helped pave the way for the tribe to be there. And why I'm here making films is because of their actions and stuff like that.
That's awesome. I'm hoping everybody gets a chance to see this because I felt it was spellbinding. I loved it. It was the first time I've been able to see your work. So when you sent it to me, I was really, frankly, deeply humbled that you let me take a look at it. And I just sat here just watching, dude. It was so good. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about this, talk to me about what matters in Florida, elsewhere, and so forth. So this was great, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's good to be reminded of what this is all about. So I really appreciate that.
Guys, thank you so much. And Shona Besh, to our guest today, Montana Cypress. Montana, I am so excited to get to know you, to follow your work, and to help share this story. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about Miccosukee history, the Everglades, and Florida with us today. That was absolutely amazing and inspiring, and I cannot wait to see where this project goes. Thank you so much to our producer, Fletcher Powell, for making this show run. And thank you to all of you for continuing to support Reckoning with Jason Herbert. If you want to find out more, you can visit my Substack at jasonherbert.substack.com or continue to like and subscribe here on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you get this podcast. We've got so many more things coming for you, so stay back, listen in, and share this with your friends. Talk to you a little bit later. Ciao for now. Bye.